this spoiling? I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't say that. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be going over all the books I read in December. I read 5 books in December. Pretty slow reading month for me, but that's alright. It should be my first video going up in the new year, so I hope you had a good new year. Props to me for filming a wrap up for every month. Let's just get into all the books I read in December. The first book I read in December is Good Material by Dolly Alderton. This is her new release and the cover is so fun. I love it. Okay, this is a literary fiction book and there is some romance in it. I honestly didn't really know much going into this book what it was about, but I've spoken a lot about her before and you guys know that I really enjoy her other books I've read, so I was really excited about this release and I was anticipating it. It actually came out in December in the UK, but it doesn't come out till January in the US. I got my hands on it as soon as I could because I was really excited. This follows, I believe, like a comedian in his 30s and he's going through a breakup, a really hard breakup that he's been with the person for a long time and like he thought they were gonna be his forever person and he gets broken up with and he basically is like lost. He's struggling with his career and I was really surprised that she wrote from a male's perspective. It all makes sense in the end why she did so. So I liked how real the characters felt. To me, they felt realistic and raw, and I feel like she's really good at writing about people struggling through things and just making it. The way she writes it is just really relatable. I also really enjoyed the comedy aspect of this. So I said before, he's a comedian, so you're in his mind. The writing was really funny. I really enjoyed that aspect of it. There's always humor in her books, but basically the ending really like made my rating go up more because it was just eye-opening and there is 2 sides to every story. I feel like that's what I got from this book, so I just really enjoy Dolly Alderton's mind. She is just really relatable, funny, comforting. That's how I would describe her book, so I liked it a lot. The themes and tropes I took away from that book were going through a breakup, experiencing heartbreak, obviously, navigating your adulthood. There was a big aspect of the book where he was just trying to figure out what he wanted to do with his life as an adult and like thinking you had everything planned out, but then it completely changing. Besides every story, like I said, I thought that was a big point of this book. And then exploration of womanhood is another aspect or theme that's touched on in that book. But I actually gave it 3.8 stars, which I feel like we're gonna say 3.8/4. I haven't like fully, I don't know, I'm still thinking about it, but I do recommend this book. I did enjoy it. If you're going through a breakup, maybe this is the book that will help you. I highly recommend this book, even if you're not going through a breakup. So we started off the month on a good note. Then the next book I read is The 7-Year Split by Ashley Poston, and I've heard so many things about this book, so I was very excited to finally pick it up and read it. And I was extremely disappointed with this book. Let me explain what it's about and like the tropes and themes, and then I'll tell you why I didn't like it. This basically follows a girl and her name is Clementine. Also, the people in this book just had odd names, not the most typical names ever, which kind of like irked me. I don't know why, that's just me. Her name's Clementine and basically she's a book publicist and she's very close with her aunt and has been for a very long time, and suddenly her aunt passes away and leaves her apartment to Clementine. A big part of this book is the main character Clementine dealing with grief, but also this is a romance book, so it's not like the main thing. I guess it is, whatever. This is a romance book, but yeah, just keep in mind grief is a heavy subject in this book. Basically, her aunt would kind of hint at the apartment being like magical, and Clementine finally experiences the magical apartment once her grandmother passes away. She wakes up one morning in the apartment, and there's a man in the apartment, and he's just there, and he is there because the apartment basically, it's like time traveling. Like, he's in the apartment but 7 years in the past, and she's 7 years in the future ahead of him. Does that make sense? But like, yeah, the concept sounds cool, right? But I would say this is kind of second chance because, like I said, she meets him in the apartment and it's him 7 years in the past. Once a couple days go by, he's no longer there, and she's in present time again. And she doesn't know where this man is or like what he's doing with his life because she spent time with him when he was 7 years in the past. So she never really finds out who he is or like tries to contact him again, but he's always on her mind, and I guess you can say the same for him. And they end up eventually connecting again. This is a romance book, but there is magical realism. So the reason I did not like this book is because they spent like, what was it, like 2 or 3 days together, not a very long amount of time. Then they like didn't see each other for another 7 years, and she was still like hung up on him and like in love with him, and I'm like, hey, but you don't even know him. I don't know, some books are just like really unrealistic, and you're just like, I can't relate to it, and I just like don't really care about it. That's how I felt with this book. Also, I could not stand, I'm sorry, this is just a preference, but I could not stand the writing. To me, it felt like I was reading a fan fiction, and not in a good way. There were so many words used to describe things, and the way things were described and written were so cringe, and I just could not, like, I'm so surprised I finished this book. That's all I have to say. And I think the only reason I did was because it was the last month of the year, and I was like, I need to persevere and give it a chance. And it wasn't for me, but that is okay. If you like this book, that's totally cool. If you've been thinking about reading this book, that's my opinion. The rating I gave this book was 2 stars. So that's that. Then it was December 10th, and I was like, now's the time for me to start a Christmassy romance book. So I picked up With Love from Cold World by Alicia Thompson. I've actually had this for a while. It came out this year, and the cover just really intrigued me. The graphics just cool. The cover really just caught my attention, and I'd be honest with you, I didn't read the back. I'm guilty of doing that. Okay, I thought this book was cute. It was decent. It's definitely not something I'm gonna like remember too much of, but it was fun and cute for what it was. And you know, if you're looking for like a quick Christmassy romance book, I would recommend this. This basically follows Lauren and Asa, and they both work at the same place. They work at this like Winter Wonderland indoor store in Florida, and they've worked together for a while, but they've never really have gotten to know each other and kind of dislike each other, even though they don't know each other very well. And the boss comes to both of them and basically says, I want you each to come up with an idea on how we can improve the store and like things we can add, and come up with a proposal. And they both are assigned to this, and they kind of start to talk more and hang out more and get to know each other more, and lo and behold, a relationship forms. This book, like I said, this book was cute. It was decent. Some of the themes and tropes are workplace romance, and then holiday, Christmas themed, obviously. Opposites attract is also one of the tropes in this. She's very like goody two-shoes, like she's kind of an overachiever, she's a people pleaser, and he's kind of just like laid back. Yeah, so opposites attract. And then I wrote enemies to lovers, but like I feel like enemies to lovers is used too often. I really only feel like it makes sense when you're talking about like a fantasy book, but I guess you could say they just didn't really like each other, and they got to know each other and started to like each other. I wouldn't say they were enemies, but that is that. I gave that book 3 stars. Like I said, 3 stars, decent book, and yeah. Then I wasn't completely satisfied with that holiday book. Like I wanted something a little more holiday-esque. So I picked up this. It's called Love Holly, and it looked extremely Christmassy, as you can tell. And guess what? I didn't read the back again, and I was totally caught off guard. with what this book was about. At the top it says, sometimes it takes a stranger to bring you back to yourself. Basically, this is about a girl named Holly, and each December she starts to write to a stranger who's spending Christmas alone, because she's also spending Christmas alone, has been for the last 3 years, and usually no one answers her letters, but one day she receives a letter from this old woman, and she's actually battling cancer and she doesn't really have any family to talk to. So Holly receives this letter from Emma, and then she realizes that she actually might know where this woman lives, and she kind of wants to track her down and, you know, be there for her. And in the very beginning of this book, Holly and her sister are like on a road trip. They stop at this cafe and they run into this man, and they have a very quick encounter. They never see each other again, but this man she ran into is connected to Emma somehow, the woman she ends up receiving the letter from and forming a relationship with. So a lot of this book I feel like was more, I would say this was more of a literary fiction book than a romance book. To me, it was more about family issues and struggling with grief and struggling with losing someone, even though they're still like present. They haven't passed away, but you have still lost them in some capacity. And then there was the little subplot of romance. There wasn't a lot of romance in this, to be honest. Even though it looks like a romance book, I feel like the very ending there was a good chunk of romance, but otherwise I feel like the romance wasn't super pivotal in this book. Another big plot in this book is Holly struggling with her family and the relationship she has with them because of something that happened in the book, which it's kind of a traumatic thing that happened, so she no longer speaks to them. So she bonds with Emma over that. Some of the tropes and themes are grief and losing someone, like I said, and then subplot of romance and kind of a slow burn, because you do get little snippets of her and Jack interacting, but I wouldn't say they were it wasn't really romantic at first. Maybe they were a little flirtatious, but it was kind of a slow burn. It wasn't the main focus of the book and like what the book was about, but you do get a little bit of romance in this. So I thought this book was decent. Definitely not what I thought it was going to be, but not terrible. I also gave this 3 stars, so definitely not your fun holiday lighthearted romance at all, which I thought it was going to be. Thought they would write, like I thought the male character and the female character were going to be the ones writing letters to each other. That was not what happened, but that's okay. I need to look at what I'm fucking buying before I buy it. Not that that was bad, but just like I was looking for something more lighthearted and holiday themed. But anywho, so then I was like, you know what, no more, that is enough like Christmas books for me. I had enough time to read one more book this month, and that was Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. So this is the duology to Divine Rivals, and this is a fantasy book with a pretty big subplot of romance. I've talked about Divine Rivals before. I don't want to get too much into this book. In Divine Rivals, there's these 2 journalists, Kit and Iris, and they both work at the same company. They're both journalists and write for a newspaper, and they're both trying to get the same promotion, and Iris is struggling in her personal life because her brother is currently fighting in a war, because there's 2 gods that are fighting in a war, and one of them is trying to basically take over. Iris's brother went to go help and fight, and then Iris is back home being a journalist trying to work, but she decides to go basically like go to the front lines and experience what's happening at the war and start reporting on what's happening, and just to see her brother. And through all this, she is typing letters on her typewriter, and she thinks she's not really like sending them to anyone. She's writing them addressed to her brother, but obviously he's not receiving them. She's just writing them for like her own peace of mind, to feel like she's connected to her brother because she hasn't seen him in a long time. And then her colleague Kit that works with her somehow receives her letters because his typewriter is magically connected to hers. So they start writing letters back and forth to each other, and their relationship forms. At first she doesn't know that she's writing to him. He doesn't reveal that right away. Their romance forms, and this war is happening, and it's really intense and it's romantic. Like, it's really good. Divine Rivals, and then this book is the sequel to that, and I'm so sad, like this is it, like there's not gonna be another book after this. I really did enjoy this. I would say this book was a little bit more intense and high stakes because your first book was more of an introduction and heavy romance, but this is more of high stakes fantasy because the war is happening. They're kind of separated in this book, so it was more intense, and which not in a bad way, but I was entertained. If you want to read this book, make sure you read Divine Rivals first. Enemies to lovers, fantasy with a subplot of romance, higher powers, gods, war. This is like the third fantasy book I've ever read, so if you want to get into fantasy and you like romance, I would recommend these two, Divine Rivals and the sequel, Ruthless Vows. So I gave Ruthless Vows 4 stars. And that is it, guys. Those are all the books I read in December. This is my last wrap up of 2023. 74th book I read in 2023 and the last book I read in 2023. I'm glad this was it, and I hope to read more by that author because I really do. I really enjoyed those. I'm excited to continue these videos in 2024, and I hope to post more consistently and post more than just wrap-ups. But thank you so much for watching, and if you've been watching these videos, it's been like a year since I started this channel, and I know I've said this in my last video. I said this before, whatever. If you watch these videos, I really appreciate you, and I hope you are getting some recommendations from the books I talk about, and I'm excited to continue this in the new year. So I wish you all the best and hope you have a good new year, and I'll see you in my next video.